It's only here and then it's gone. Good morning and welcome from a very snowy and now melting Powers Court with Kilbride. It's Sunday the 27th of February and you're welcome to join us this morning for this short service of worship. We are reminded this morning of the Transfiguration. Jesus chooses his closest disciples and brings them to higher ground with him. And the veil between heaven and earth, let's just say, is removed. Today we consider the transformation that can be brought about by truly connecting with Christ and how he can work within us throughout our entire lives. But first, we pause for a moment, wherever we may be, to acknowledge the presence of Christ with us now. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. While he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, they saw 2 men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep. But since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, A cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my Son, my chosen. Listen to him." Then, when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things that they had seen. I remember sitting in St. Anne's Church on one of the little red kneelers. I was a very small child and watching tiny particles of dust slowly rising upwards in a coloured shaft of sunlight coming through one of the stained glass windows. The first 10 years of my life were blessed. After Mum died, everybody gathered around us, so we were blessed, Dad and I, by our own people and by good friends. My two safe places in life at that stage were my father, who is my all-time hero, and my great aunt Susie, who gallantly took me on at the age of 70 she was when she started to mind me fully. These were my safe places because the first 10 years of my life were slightly different, I suppose. There was a great sense of uncertainty as to who I would be with. And so as a result of that, I became quite a flexible young one because I needed to flex, I thought, to be able to. I was a bit like a chameleon because I didn't know who would be minding me or what context I would find myself in. And what that does to a person is it creates within them, on one hand, a great flexibility because you just have to adapt to whatever situation you're in. But on the other hand, there's a great sense of discombobulation, a great sense of uncertainty, which can actually follow you. So that's one context. The second 10 years of my life, when my dad remarried, I very much took myself into myself. I closed off to a lot of people around me. I didn't really show my authentic self to many people at that stage. There was a need of, I suppose within me, there was a need for a type of steadfast security. Again, life was not, or maybe I chose it not to be, as straightforward and as reliable and as, I don't know. So I needed the security and I needed this unconditional love, that no matter who I was or what I was, I could be loved. Looking back, it just doesn't seem to be any great surprise that I went from one beautiful man to another. So in other words, I went from my father for the first 10 years, 20 years or more of my life, to a young carpenter who began to make complete sense to me. The words that he spoke about love in particular was the type of love that I had really craved all my life. It was a very stable thing. It was a very unconditional thing. And it was a transformative thing. It could transform anyone. And I suppose looking back, that was the hope that I had, that I would be accepted and that he could transform me in that way. I remember standing in the same St. Anne's Church on many occasions, singing a beautiful hymn, and of course hymns make a lot of us cry. And I remember feeling the tears on my face. And I wasn't sure then, as I'm not sure now, whether it was that my mind had taken me to a place where Dad would no longer be with me in St. Anne's, which would have broken my heart. Or whether it was that the other beautiful man in my life, that carpenter's son, had actually been killed. They had seen fit to crucify him. And I do remember sitting for the 3 hours in St. Anne's as I became a young woman or a teenager. I used to go in on my own on occasion and sit for the 3 hours on a Good Friday and quietly weep in the corner at the very notion that somebody who had promised so much could be so misunderstood by the world. I had the remarkable experience in my mid-teens of the presence of Christ. I was out remarkably under a tree and I felt his presence acutely, and it changed me because it made me understand that everything that was said about him rising from the dead and being with us now was true in my own heart. And hence, I suppose, at the end of the day, finally, I ended up doing what I'm doing now. Why am I telling you all this? Well, I think that the Christ has the power to transform us. And I often think that this world is really a difficult place to be sometimes. This earth can really drag us down. It can really root us back to the earth again. And we forget about the divine. We can't actually put our head up over the clouds that surround us. The other thing is that when we have encountered the divine like this, when we have given him our heart, we don't want to come down again from the mountain. We do want to build those houses. We do want to stay with him. But I suppose I tell my story in the hope that it might be able to speak into somebody else's story. There are two things at play here. One is that at some stage in my life, and maybe in yours, I was profoundly touched by the presence of the Christ, and I fell in love with him. I fell in love with what he promised, this unconditional love, this way of being, which I would call the kingdom of God, we all would, in this world. But the other side of it is that it's very easy for us to get lost. It's very easy for us to step away, to invest far more of ourselves into what's going on in the world than to remember that first point of contact, that transfiguration, if you like, when we saw him as he truly is in our lives. So, yeah, it's emotional, isn't it? I think that my prayer today for all of you and myself would be that those of us who know him can renew our knowing of him, can go back in our minds to that time when we acutely felt his presence, that can be upset that they killed him because we love him. I pray for those who don't know him, perhaps that he does touch them, so that they'll never be lonely, because they'll know that there's always a presence with them. Those who have locked themselves away like I did, or those who are discombobulated like I was, can feel that through it all, there is a presence that can actually ground them in the divine, that can bring them home within themselves, that can allow them the confidence to be their authentic selves and to feel completely loved as they are. I can only speak into this for the rest of my days when I think of Christ, because each one of us comes with our own story of him. And perhaps part of mission and ministry in life, no matter what area of life you're in, is perhaps to relive that and to speak about it in order that it might help someone else. The peace of Christ and the presence of Christ be acutely visible in your life this day. Amen.